Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast, the show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a survivalist and a prepared individual in today's society. I'm your host, Chris Bartagone, ZP002. Back with me on the show, my co-host, Jamie Franks. Jamie, welcome back to the show. The senior
Hey, good to
chief.
be here, man. That's
Yeah,
right.
man. The senior chief, which is going to kind of connect to today's issue, or today's subject, if you will. But how you been?
Good. As our listeners may know, I am still in the military, and the military is trying to do what the military does, and they're trying to send me away somewhere.
Oh, no.
Right here, right now, that will make me miss like all the holidays that are coming up, and so
Oh,
I'm
wow.
trying to avoid that because I am a senior chief, and the thing they're trying to send me away for is something that an E5 could and should do.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
it's they're calling me for one of my job specialties that I literally did 19 years ago, and really haven't done it much since then. But they're saying I'm only one of two people on the whole
Oh,
West Coast
man.
Pacific fleet that has this qualification and experience, and so I'm like, yeah, but I'm an old 45-year-old dude that's been in the Navy for over 27 years. Like, I'm probably not the guy you want for this, but all
Wow.
right.
Wow. So obviously this would be a deployment.
Yeah.
Okay. And is it, did they give you any information? Like, I mean,
Oh, I have all
time.
the information.
Oh, you have all the information.
It's literally something that I have done this exact thing in this exact location before.
Oh, wow.
But
Okay.
it was
Well, your last,
2008, 2009.
oh, okay.
I did this
Okay.
exact job in this exact place, and yes, I know how to do it, but I did that when I was
Right.
25,
Yeah.
26 years old,
Yeah.
and
And your last
um,
deployment was in 22, right?
2022, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And they're trying again.
Well,
Man.
I'm supposed to be non-deployable because of the duty that I'm in now as an instructor,
Okay.
and this was supposed to take me out to retirement, so I wasn't supposed to go anywhere anymore. But
Oh,
I am
well,
still. This is why they call it being in the service, because
yeah.
I'm here to serve, I guess. But yeah, so but yeah,
Wow. Okay. Yeah, well, you know what? And I think we've talked about that in the past. When you go on deployment, it's not just, you've got a dog, you've got a daughter, you've got a life, all of these things are things that you then need to kind of figure out and put on hold. And I mean, I know it's always a hard thing. So,
yeah, and
and
as a single guy, like, I can't just hand the house over to my wife. I have to do I go so far as to turn the power off? Do I,
right.
turn my internet service off? Do I empty out my refrigerator and unplug it, and all that for however long I'm
Yeah.
going to be
Yeah.
gone? But
And I mean, obviously that's a very, cumbersome situation that you get put in. And I think that's why service members get thanked for their service, because it's not just you know it's day to day. You could just be regular work, regular life, but when it comes to deployment, your life gets upended for an extended period of time. And some are short deployments maybe, and some are long deployments, but you
and I
know
just found out about this yesterday, and if I have to go, excuse me, I'll have to leave in 2 weeks. So
Oh,
that's
wow. That is crazy. Wow. That is crazy. Well, man, I wish you the best. And I know that everybody listening probably wishes you the best for what the best outcome in this situation. But man, oh man, the senior chief, the duties of the senior chief.
Indeed.
Um, so anyway, well, I mean, that's the military side of things, and that's how it goes. But you being a skilled um, technician, I guess, in the Navy, gives you a skill set that we're going to talk about today. And listen, there's other people that have the same skill set, and is this today's episode goes in line with our navigation series. We've already done and put out one show on land navigation, and there's a part two that's going to be dropping. But the follow, or the I guess maybe the trifecta when it comes to navigation, short of, I guess, maybe air navigation, how do you figure out where to go when you're flying a plane, but is sea navigation, or navigating on top of and under the water. And I know that you Is it drive? You drive the airboats?
So,
Is
yeah,
it
so right now
pilot
I'm
or
a
drive?
well, the Navy has the nautical everything up. Like we don't have a water fountain, we have a scuttlebutt, and you don't go use the bathroom, you go to the head, and you don't go to
Okay.
the kitchen, we go to the galley. So in Navy speak, I'm a hovercraft craft master. Outside the Navy, it would be a hovercraft pilot.
Okay.
But
So
yeah,
pilot.
so
All right. So and then obviously on top of that, you are certified when it comes to scuba. So you do a lot of um scuba diving and spend some time underwater. So there are two different ways of looking at this, and I think we're going to get into pretty much all of it today. But one of the things that I sometimes put in the middle of the show, at the end of the show, I just want to always start it off and let everybody know that we really appreciate you joining us every week for these episodes. I love getting the screenshots of people's radios in their car when they're listening to the show driving to work, whether you do that or whether you do it while you're out mowing the lawn and you're wearing AirPods. Thank you. Obviously, as everybody knows, we drop our shows on Thursdays on Spotify and Apple, and then the video portion goes out on YouTube. So if you haven't checked those out, please head over there and do that. That's where you'll see visual aids that we may use. That's where you'll find links to stuff that we talk about in the show. But please head over to YouTube, find the ZERT channel, and like and subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified. And then anybody that's listening on Apple or Spotify, if you provide any comments and give us reviews on that show, obviously it will help as well. So thank you. Also, remember, if you are listening to this show and you are not a ZERT member, ZERT members do get discounts to things that are on our website and then also off of our website. We have a bunch of affiliate companies that we work with that provide coupon codes to ZERT members so they can get discounts on things like plate carriers, plates, um, shirts, Glock milling and customization, knives, you name it, firearm sites, and then everything that's on the ZERT website as well. So that's it for the advertisement portion or the, I guess, administration stuff of the show. And now we can get into it. So, Jamie, I
yes,
guess
Chris,
let's see. How long have you? So you've been in the Navy for
a little over 27 years
a
now. Yeah.
little, okay, a little over 27 years. So you have been dealing with nautical navigation, I guess. Is that the best terminology? Nautical navigation?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So, and again, because the Navy has the Navy everything up.
Right.
There's blue water, excuse me, blue water and brown water. There's open ocean navigation and littoral navigation. Littoral meaning shallower water near land, stuff like that.
Okay.
I have just if there's any new listeners or people that don't listen well or whatever, I've brushed up against this a lot. Like especially after my time on Top Shot, and people thought I was something that I'm not, or things that I'm not. So just to be clear, I am not, never have been, never will be any sort of special operator, special operations person. I'm not a SEAL, never was. I have worked with the SEAL teams.
Okay.
I've worked with EOD. I've done 11 deployments in the Navy, and some of those have been on the ground. Um, where navigation comes in, actually, and if you want to laugh at this, that's fine. But I'm I can't vouch for how legit it is now, but when I was in high school, I was in NJROTC,
Okay.
and as part of NJROTC, we had an orienteering team, which that's how non-military people say land navigation. And there we actually had land navigation competitions, and much like competition shooting, if you want to get better or find out how good or bad you are, compete. And so I was actually, as a teenager, prior to ever joining the military, I was actually really squared away on land navigation or orienteering. I actually, my last year of high school, after yeah, my senior year of high school, I volunteered for a municipal search and rescue team, and as a 17-year-old kid on the team, I was probably the best one at land navigation on this municipal search and rescue team before I joined the Navy. And then when I joined the Navy, I've done like you just said, I've done open ocean transits on ships, and by rating, again, Navy speak, in every other military branch, it's MOS, military occupational specialty.
Okay.
My my job specialty or rating in the Navy is an operations specialist, so that is a navigational specific rate. Like the two things I have probably done most in my career is navigation of one sort or another, and radio communications. Um, but that's, prior to being recruited into the hovercraft program. But I've done open ocean transit navigation on ships. I've done small boats, like you said. I'm a diver. I've done underwater navigation. I've been a tactical air controller, so I am sitting stationary at a at a base station or terminal, uh, tracking where the aircraft is coming in from, or where they are, and either tracking them in to do an emergency landing or to drop ordnance on a target.
Okay.
So I've done navigation in many forms, but I'm not a Ranger, Delta Force, SEAL,
Right.
none of that stuff. But a lot of my 27 years has been navigation centric in one form or another. And then this last chapter of my career, being a hovercraft pilot, we're transiting at very, very high speeds, in very close proximity to other ships and land. In fact, it is our job to transition from the water onto land, to deliver Marines and combat equipment, from ship to the beach where they have to fight. And we have to be able to transit, uh, at high speed, so up to 50 knots.
Okay.
So 50 knots is approximately 70 miles per hour. Let me check my math real quick.
And I just while you're doing that,
That's
I think
60 miles an hour. So,
okay.
and we have to be able to go 200 miles over water and arrive at an exact minute within 100 yards of a predetermined point. So navigation, is
Wow.
very key in my life these days as well. So
Okay.
so yeah. So I
And,
I do have a deep background in this stuff, even though I
okay.
was never a special operator. But
Well, I don't know that. Well, so I mean, just to kind of say, I don't know that you need to be a special operator to really understand navigation. I
you
mean,
don't.
anybody with a boater's license needs to understand some kind of nautical navigation when it comes to getting.
Well, you hit on a point that I was going to make as we start
Okay.
getting into how to navigate over water, is that, one of the things that I preach about a lot, and a dead horse that I beat over and over and over and over, is the necessity of learning and training and practicing it. And the thing specifically that you just hit on was one of the things I was going to talk about kind of in my intro. Is
Okay. Well,
there, in a lot of places, there is no barrier to entry to owning a boat.
right.
There really is a lot to know with owning a boat. Driving a boat is not like a car in any way, shape, or form, other than most boats have a steering wheel. That's really the only similarity. And in a lot of places, you could go today with no examination, no license, no testing, no registration, no insurance, no nothing. You could go today and buy a boat and put it in the water, and off you go. And there's a lot of dangerous people out there for that reason.
Well, okay,
And
so but let me just I wanna just make a kind of a point against that. You could do the same and go buy a car without getting a license. Getting a boat, you have to take the boater safety course and you have to get a license, but it doesn't stop you from doing exactly what you just said, where you can go buy a boat, put it in the water, and put gas in it and head out. There is nothing physically stopping you, but if you get
but
pulled over, you're dealing
where
with that.
navigation is concerned, specifically on a car, you're at least always going to be on a road,
Well,
and
you're very, very, very accurate
and
there.
you can only get so lost when you're in contact with the road. So,
True, true.
but with
Um,
along with navigation on a boat, this was not something I planned to talk about at all, but there's navigational rules of the road.
you're right.
And like, as part of our mission briefs, we always address any rules of the road concerns, and it's one of the points I always bring up is, like, a lot of people in their mission briefs will say, that we could encounter a boat that's not in compliance with rules of the road. I'll put it in my briefs that there are people out there that don't even know that there are rules of the road. So,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, very true. Okay, so So you've got some experience working with this stuff, working in this arena, if you will, with a boat and then also as a diver. Um, so I guess the best way maybe to start it is, what are the different are the types of navigation that everybody should be aware of by now because they've listened to the other two episodes? Do those types of navigation apply when it comes to navigating on and under the water?
So, Chris, I'm going to do something right now that I never
Uh-oh.
do. So just
Oh,
bear
no.
with me,
Okay.
listeners. Bear with me. I'm going to talk about shooting for a second.
Oh, no.
So, all shooting, every single form of shooting there is, action shooting and combat shooting and tactical shooting and competition shooting and bullseye shooting and shooting a bow and arrow and shooting a rifle and shooting a shotgun and like all shooting is two things: aligning your sights and pressing the trigger without disturbing your sights. That's it. If
Right.
you can master those two things, you will be the greatest shooter on earth. But so when you boil it down to its most basic thing, all shooting is aligning your sights, press the trigger without disturbing your sights.
Right.
Same thing with navigation. All navigation is going a specific direction for a specific distance. That's it. Now, in different forms of navigation, under the water, on land, there are different challenges presented, but it's fun at its fundamental core. It's all the same. So, in the if there have been two episodes of navigation, I didn't listen to both of them. I listened, I think, to the first one with you and Paul.
Yeah. No,
And by
only
the way,
one so far.
oh, okay. Well, I brought notes and visual aids, so I guess I'm not a subject matter expert after all, according to him. But um, so you guys talked a lot about dead reckoning. So dead reckoning it's a big part of land navigation. It's a big part of on the water navigation, and it's the biggest part of underwater navigation. And dead reckoning is basically just going a known heading or direction or course at a given speed for a specific time, and then you can use that to determine approximately where you are. So um, that's the same in all three of those. The formulas for determining distance, speed, and time are something that's universal. You do it in different ways, but the
Mhm.
formula is universal. Like if you want to figure out, so it's a triangle, and if you want to determine if you're trying to figure out the bottom leg of the triangle, you use these two legs. Uh, you know, any two will give you the third one. And an example is so if you want to determine how far you've gone, it's how fast you've gone times how long you've gone. So if you have been driving in a car at 60 miles an hour and you've been driving at 60 miles an hour for 2 hours, how far have you gone?
120 miles.
120 miles. That there you go. You have just determined distance. Now, if you want to determine speed, you use distance and time. So if you have been, if you look down at your odometer,
Are you making me do math?
yes, and you realize you have been driving for 100 miles,
Yeah.
and you look at your watch and it's taken you 2 hours to drive 100 miles, how fast have you gone?
Whew, thank God you're making me do easy math. 50.
50. Okay, so you have just determined speed using distance and time. So now,
Yes.
if I'm driving to Las Vegas and it's 300 miles away and I plan on driving 100 miles an hour to get there, how long is it going to take me to get there?
You're a good instructor when it comes to easy math. 3.
3. Okay, so you have just determined time using your distance and speed. So people do this stuff all the time, probably in your car, without like
Of
really
course.
realizing that you're
Yeah.
calculating a fundamental branch of the navigation tree. And so that's really, those types of calculations can obviously get more complicated, but that's really all dead reckoning is it's determining, is using those formulas for distance, speed, and time, and then attaching a compass heading or bearing, azimuth, course, heading, whatever you want to say to it. So all of those things are pretty universal in no matter what type of navigation you're going. So like open ocean navigation gets tricky because whether you're doing land navigation on foot or you're doing land navigation in a car, a ground vehicle, an overland vehicle, whatever, you're physically in contact with the earth. So if you want to determine where you are, all you need to do is stop, and you're not going to go anywhere because you're
Right.
physically stopped because you're in contact with the earth. Well, a boat, even when you're stopped, you're not stopped. The wind is continuing to push you, the seas are continuing to push you, and you're not in contact with anything except the water, which is fluid. So you're still continuing to move. So um, when you're trying to navigate over water, yes, you're following a heading at a certain speed for a certain amount of time, but that entire time, the seas are pushing you one way, the winds are pushing you one way. So you might have your engine set to where the engine is going at 20 miles an hour, but the winds might be on your stern and pushing you an additional 2 miles an hour. So over the course
Wow.
of 3 hours, you think you've gone 60 miles, you've actually gone 66 miles or what, whatever like that. So
Right.
these are, so you have to have a method of determining your actual speed. We call that speed over ground. And because we have to navy everything up, um, we determine nautical miles as a term as opposed to statute miles. Do you know how
Okay.
far a statute mile is?
No, I do not.
You don't?
No. Should I?
So, well, I mean,
Is it just, I mean,
if you were on a TV show called Top Shot and you had to shoot a 30-inch target 1 mile away, I mean, you would need to know how far away that is.
okay. Is it 1 mile away?
So it's 5,280 feet is a statute
Okay.
mile, right? So,
Okay. So
um,
feet.
yeah, and because most people like me and apparently you are mathematical midgets, and so like when we're determining traveling over great distances, like traveling across an ocean, if we can round things off and make it a little bit easier, then it becomes easier.
Right.
So way back in the days of the Earth's exploration, so like back in Roman times, um, they didn't know the Earth was round. And apparently, we still haven't ironed that
Oh,
one out. But
yep. Still a contention
but
point.
in the Roman Empire, they thought they were the only civilization on Earth until we started, getting out over water and exploring and finding that, there were other lands out there. So the
Right.
the statute mile, I think, comes from the Romans, and I believe it was the the distance that was covered by 1,000 paces of an average man, and it was whatever. And so it was anyway. It was determined to be 5,280 feet. Well, once we started exploring greater distances over water, they came up with a nautical mile. And to determine the mathematical calculation that goes into a nautical mile is 1 minute of longitude at the equator, right? Because the equator is the Earth's fattest part. As we get closer to the poles, those circles get smaller and smaller as we go up and down. So spoiler alert, the Earth is round, it's a sphere. And so there's 360 degrees in a circle or a sphere. So with 360 degrees times 60 minute per degree, you come up with 21,600 minutes. So that equals 21,600 miles in circumference of the Earth.
My Lord.
So yeah. So if we um if you divide that um
And folks, none of you need to be doing this math right now. Jamie is literally going to do this math for you. And
yeah.
please, you don't have to do this.
So if you do the math and you want to break that down to feet,
Right.
the amount the circumference of the Earth in feet divided by 21,600 comes out to, what is it, Chris?
No.
Oh,
Nope.
all right.
You
It's
just better give me the
6,000.
answer.
It's 6,076 feet. So a statute mile is 5,280 feet. So a nautical mile is 6,076 feet. So a nautical
Okay.
mile is slightly longer than a statute mile. And let's see if you can do this one. How many feet are in a yard?
Oh, God. 3.
3, right? So the I believe the U.S. Navy, beginning in 1954, just decided to hack off that 76 feet and just started saying that 1 nautical mile is 2,000 yards. And then that was adopted by really the rest of the world, like now, like commercial ships, merchant ships. Like if you're using an overland or no, sorry, an overwater GPS application, that like a nautical mile is 2,000 yards, but it comes from 6,076 feet, which is actually a division of measurement of the Earth's circumference. Anyway, so now when I'm in open water and I need to determine my speed, I need to know
Yeah.
how many of those nautical miles I have gone in an hour, because miles per hour, nautical miles per hour, knots.
Right.
So if I'm in open ocean and I don't have a GPS and I don't have anything like that, well, and there's no reference point. When you're in your car, you can look at the car next to you and at least determine if you're going faster or slower than they are. But when you're in open ocean with no other visual reference points in sight, how do you determine speed? Because remember, when we're dead reckoning, we need to know what speed we've gone for how long to determine our distance that we've gone. So um, back in the olden days, the term knots for nautical miles per hour comes because the ancient mariners would have a log or a piece of wood and would have a rope tied to it, and the rope would be a standard length. The length doesn't matter as long as
Okay.
you know what it is, and there would be knots tied in the line at regular intervals. And again,
Got it.
the interval doesn't matter as long as it's standardized, meaning it's the same all the way down the line and you know what it is so you can do the calculation. Ancient mariners, every 30 minutes, every half an hour, they would throw this log line overboard, and they would have they called it a log glass, which was an hourglass that had 30 seconds worth of sand in it.
Okay.
So so one guy would be the keeper of the glass and one guy would do the line, and they would
Right.
say ready, set, go. They would throw the line in the water, and one guy would just count how many knots he felt slip through his hand as the ship
Huh.
was moving through the water,
Interesting.
and the other guy would time it for 30 seconds, and then that would tell them how many knots
Very,
they had
very
traveled.
interesting.
And
Yep.
then so they would do that every 30 minutes. Why do you think they would do that every 30 minutes?
I don't know, Jimmy. You're asking a lot of questions
No,
today.
no, I'm trying to engage you.
Yeah. I
So
know. I'm
it's
engaged.
because
I'm
when we're traveling over water, again, we're not in contact with the ground. And
okay.
so the wind direction and wind speed and the direction of the seas and the sea state all
Right.
impacts it. Like the seas could be slowing you down, the seas could be actually making you go faster than what you think. So these things change minute to minute, hour to hour. So they would do this every 30 minutes to compute their average speed over ground. How fast do we, again, if we're talking about a sailing ship, then it's really a crapshoot. But if we are talking about a vessel that has an engine, your engine and your instrumentation can be telling you that you're going 20 miles per hour, but with the winds and seas, they could either be pushing against you and slowing you down or pushing with you and speeding you up. So you
Got
need
it.
to
So
determine your speed over ground. Yes.
okay, so let me jump in here for a second then. With obviously you're taking the evolution of, kind of how it started
Yep.
and getting to how it is now, but with all of the instruments that are now on boats, how much of that is still kind of in question? And specifically the part that you just said, right? Your gauges is it still confused? I mean, as much technology as we have right now, are the gauges still confused saying you've gone X, but you might have actually gone X plus?
So on my hovercraft that I fly right now, that in a few hours I will be leaving to go fly with a student,
Yep.
um, we have our we have a whole navigation suite, and we have a GPS antenna. We have an inertial nav system, which can feel the inertia of our movement and do a computation to determine our movement based on our inertia. And then
Okay.
we have a magnetic compass, and then we have a basically kind of like a gyro compass, and then so we have an integrated nav suite. So all of these inputs feed into a computer, and then the computer spits out the average of all four of those sensors. And to answer your question, yes, there's what we call a figure of merit, or it's a gauge of our error, because my instrumentation can be telling me that I'm going 35 knots on course 270, but then on my navigator's display, he can tell that we're actually being pushed to the left 2 degrees. So I think I'm steering 270, but I'm actually moving over ground an average of 2 degrees off of
Wow.
268. So I would need to steer 272 to compensate for that 2 degree set. Or if the seas are pushing us or pushing against us, my navigator has a way to that he can see, because he can see each the
Yeah.
readout of each sensor individually. What I'm seeing on my display as the pilot, I'm seeing the integrated input of all four. So yeah, and GPS systems, they can be affected by weather, they can be affected by hackers, that they
Right.
they can be affected by outages, they can be affected by dead batteries. Um, so yeah, gone are the days that we're counting, throwing a log overboard and counting
Sure.
knots on a
Right.
rope. But it does this. I am going somewhere with this where it does lead
Yeah.
into the way we do things now. But
Okay.
yeah,
Go ahead. Just wanted to ask that question. Obviously, I know that technology has evolved, and like when we talk about obviously pilots right now and flying big
yep,
planes, like there's an autopilot thing that you've seen and heard of in every scenario where they fly the plane for you. And I don't know if they have that type of thing in boats. But I'm sure, like when you get to those larger boats, like cruise ships or whatnot, and you're setting, like I'm sure there is some kind of autopilot based off of, latitude, longitude. We're
hmm
going to this place, so yeah, just to kind of jump in and ask a couple of
yeah.
questions there.
So
But go ahead, please.
modern, like high end modern GPSs can determine your position now within about a foot. I remember earlier in my military career, the absolute best like figure of merit you could get would be within about 3 feet. But
Okay.
now they've technology's improved, and so now your higher end, like really good GPS, can determine your position down to 1 foot, I think. Um, and so you bring up a good point, because aircraft are also susceptible to the things that I just talked about. Like an aircraft can think it's flying at a certain speed at a certain heading, but it's being pushed
Right.
by the winds and stuff. And also, this was something I was going to go into uh, when we got into like how this applies to underwater navigation. But if you can think of a
Sure.
string, and you have a string that's 12 inches long and it's stretched out straight, right?
Yep.
If you curve that string going up and going down and going up and going down, what happens to the length of the string?
Well, yeah, you shorten that length
It shortens, right?
considerably.
So
Yeah.
so with an airplane, or when you're diving, going up and down in altitude or depth, that also affects your how far you think you have gone versus how far you've actually gone. So in that's why it's important for aircraft to maintain a specific altitude for a specific time, and that's for a diver that's trying to do underwater navigation. You need to maintain a constant depth for that reason, so you're not
Gotcha.
shortening your distance that you think you have gone. But yeah, so uh, I talked at the top about how determining your distance you've gone, determining your speed, and determining your time are the three things you need for the fundamentals of navigation. But you also just hit on a point, like an aircraft or a ship doing autopilot. You
Yep.
do have to have like a touch point. You have to have a reset point, because, like I said, if I'm traveling 3,000 miles over open ocean, I don't have any visual reference points. And back in the days of ancient mariners, they didn't have a GPS, they didn't have a latitude, longitude, but there's twice a day they could actually determine their position, and they could basically reset or recalibrate um, what their actual position was, and then start dead reckoning off of that. And then, so the way they would do that is, well, they would do
Hmm.
Do you so a lot of people have probably seen this, and
Okay.
maybe don't know what it is, but it's this little triangular instrument, and it's kind of like a rocker at the bottom and like a triangular frame at the top, and it has like a little scope that you look through.
Oh
You
yeah,
see
yeah.
it in movies. It's
Yep.
called a sextant, and what that is that it measures it measures angles from the horizon to a known point in the sky. So every day, every single day on Earth, what's one known point that we have in the sky that's in the same place every day?
Okay.
What is it?
Well, the sun, the stars, the
Right.
moon. I
The
mean,
sun. You're right.
yeah.
So the sun at noon every day is where?
Well, directly above, but
Right.
yeah.
So, but now, seasons change, and uh, daylight savings and all this, but um, ancient marin. When I say ancient, I'm not really talking about all that ancient. I'm talking about as late or as recent as, like, the 1800s. Mariners would shoot an azimuth using their sextant, that tool I was describing a minute ago, and they
Okay.
would determine that when the sun was at its zenith, meaning when the sun was directly overhead, they would
Right.
mark noon. They would reset everything, because aboard ship watches change every 4 hours. That's why. Have you ever, like, You ever seen that movie Master and Commander?
You know what? I don't think I have, but Russell Crowe, right?
Yes, it's a
Yeah, yeah.
fantastic movie, and there's
Okay,
so man, they that was supposed to be a series of movies, kind of like Jack Reacher or whatever, if you will.
okay,
Um, and so the movie Master and Commander was Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World, and then the next one would be Master and Commander: The blah 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 whatever. But they were so meticulous in integrating all these nautical things, like you can hear them ringing the bell cycle, like every hour you get ding ding, and
right.
then on the second hour it's ding 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 ding. On every half hour it's one bell. So if it was 2:30, you would hear ding 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 ding
Okay,
ding, and that's and at noon, at 4 p.m., 8 p.m., and midnight, and then you get eight bells. So ding 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 ding. You actually hear that throughout the movie of Master and Commander, but what that is the watch is
oh,
changing
okay,
over. And
got it.
so they have an hourglass, and if you were
Yeah,
the officer of the deck, as soon as the hourglass ran empty, it was your job to flip it over and then count the second hour and ring the bell, then flip it over, count the hour, ring the bell.
gotcha.
That's how they did their watch rotation. That's also how they calculated their, the time based on the distance and speed they were traveling. But when the hourglass runs out, it takes the guy a second to walk over there and flip it over, and maybe an hourglass isn't calibrated exactly. So at noon every day, when the sun is exactly at its zenith, they would flip the hourglass over and start fresh exactly at noon. And then at night, they would have celestial navigation where they could shoot azimuths to known points, constellations, or like the North Star in the sky, because stars don't move, we move, right?
Right, right,
And so based on which region of the world you are, which quadrant of the sphere, whether you're in the northern hemisphere, western hemisphere, northwestern, whatever,
right.
you would have star charts, and you would shoot an azimuth to known points in the sky, and you could triangulate yourself at night based on your position versus the position of the stars, and that was a form of triangulation to actually reset uh, your position. So all day long, you think you're going along at a certain speed, at a certain distance, but you're getting pushed by the winds and seas. But every night,
Okay,
you could actually calculate where you actually are and any
sure.
corrections that need to be
So
made. Yep.
so navigating obviously by the sun is something that I think people are aware of.
Yep.
And then obviously navigating by the stars at night. But obviously the one star that is the North Star. That's one of the ways that they've always told you that you can navigate.
Yep.
And that's still obviously you were just referring to 1800s and
hmm
old person time.
So when I
But
first joined the Navy,
mhm,
uh, there actually still was a celestial navigation school in the U.S. Navy in the late 1990s, and you could actually go to the school and learn celestial navigation. But they have the U.S. Navy during the span of my career has stopped doing that. But anyway,
okay,
as late as the 1990s, it was still being taught. So,
yeah, okay, all right.
but
Um,
now we have, like you said, we have GPS. So now, if you had a ship or an aircraft with an autopilot function, it would calculate its own. So when the seas and winds are pushing you like off the course that you think you're going, that we refer to that as set and drift. So set
okay,
is lateral motion off of your heading, and drift is uh however, like in terms of speed, however much the winds and seas are helping you or hurting your speed.
right,
So GPS systems and autopilot systems take that into account, and instead of celestial navigation, we now have we can determine a latitude and longitude based off of GPS, and autopilot systems just drive toward waypoints, like latitude, longitude waypoints.
yeah,
So celestial is one way to determine it. Back in the real old days, you could do the sun and water depth. So like I'm going to use this again in a second, but like I have a chart here, and all those little numbers are
yeah,
all
okay,
water depths. And so if based on your dead reckoning, if you knew approximately where you were, you could shoot an azimuth to the sun at its zenith and determine that this is noon, and then and kind of so you would know exactly where you were timing wise. But then you could drop a lead line and determine the water depth,
got it,
and then this position of the sun, I think, gives you latitude, and then you could follow the longitude to where the water depth roughly matches what you determine, and It's not exact by any means, but that was a way of determining your
Now,
location. But yep,
okay, now is that map that you just showed and that I'm going to butcher it. What is it? Sexton? What is it? Uh,
sextant.
Sextent? That
Sextent is where Arabs go on Thursdays, and a sextant is where you
and
go to
right, and
determine.
sexting is what some politicians do, and they get caught. Didn't Wasn't there a politician that was doing something like that? Anyway,
I think there's
right,
been several, but yeah, I
right,
mean,
probably.
yeah.
But okay, but using that tool and that map, is that what they refer to as plotting a chart? Is that
So
is
a
that
chart
still?
is a because you can see this one has land on it. This is
Yep.
San Clemente Island. This is a reduced size chart that I use for training, but
Okay.
this is San Clemente Island. So this one, because it is featuring a small land feature. It does have some contour on it. Typically, a chart when it's a landmass, the landmass will just be blank. It won't have contours like a map. So a map is for land, chart is for water. But to the tools you would really need in modern day navigation, you should have a GPS unit. You do need some way of determining your speed, and then you need a compass. And like because if you're on a ship or a boat, you're not limited by how much you can carry. So the bigger compass you can have, the better. The bigger the compass is, the more accurate it's going to be because you can make real fine adjustments, on a bigger compass. And then you need a chart. And then I broke out my stuff. I'll hold it up like this. You need this is a parallel ruler, or people call them parallels. And then you have dividers.
Yep.
So you need all of these things. And then if you can, it's a great idea to have a radar on your boat, because also the thing I was going to talk about is another way to determine your position when you are close enough to see land features. You can do visual triangulation the same exact way you do in land navigation. If you're lost in land navigation, you can say, "Oh, there's a mountain over there. Let me use my compass to shoot an azimuth to the peak of that mountain." Okay, the peak of that mountain is bearing from me 270. So if from me to the mountain is 270, then from the mountain back to me is 090. So I can draw a reciprocal bearing, and then I turn this way, and I go, okay, the peak to that mountain is 045. So if the reciprocal 045 is 225, I draw a reciprocal bearing, and I can
Huh.
triangulate. And
Okay.
that's what I've drawn here. I,
Yep.
I I did an outline of San Clemente Island. So if I shoot a bearing, and this is why it's called triangulation, because you need at least three lines to make a where those three lines intersect makes what shape there, Chris?
Well, that's a little triangle.
That is a little triangle. So that's triangulation. So if you just shoot one bearing, then you would know that you are somewhere along this line, but you don't know how far. So then you shoot a second one and it makes a V, and one might think you are right where the two lines intersect, and you're probably close, but then you shoot a third one and you see that you're right there. So you're somewhere inside that little triangle, which is why it's called triangulation. And then if you shoot a fourth line of bearing, a fifth line of bearing, a sixth line of bearing, it's gonna make you more and more and more accurate the more lines you can add to this. So that's shooting bearings. That's visual
Okay.
navigation and triangulation based on a bearing. But on this side, I drew radar navigation, because in radar navigation we don't shoot bearings, we shoot distances. So where on this side of the map I had bearings to known points, on this side I have distances.
Now, I'm gonna jump in and just
Okay.
flip that over. And so for all of you that are just listening to this, and you have not gone over, or you don't really go over to the YouTube channel and watch it. What you've done here, and if anybody has seen the movie, the Wilson, Tom Hanks, what was that one called?
Castaway.
Castaway. So at one point he does that. He kind of does this triangulation in in the cave, right? He uses some kind of he uses a piece of coal, and he
Yep.
draws that out, and he does it based on time and distance to kind of understand the
The search
possible
area
the
and the
search
possibility
area.
of him being
Yeah,
found. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So is that kind of what this is right here? And I gave that
Yeah,
that analogy just because people can I went as soon as you showed me this, I was like, "Oh, okay, I've seen that kind of being done in that movie
but
clip
like
there." But
in
go ahead.
in the Castaway example, his is a very rough estimate based on kind of a map that he's picturing in his mind.
Right.
Um, he doesn't actually have a map, but yeah. So on this side, I've got what we would do for radar navigation, which again, instead of shooting a bearing or an azimuth to a point where we can see these nice prominent points of land on radar, and we can shoot distance. And so I'll take my dividers, and instead
Yep.
of measuring a line of bearing, I measure out a distance, and then I swing an arc from that known point. And then what shape does that make where all the arcs meet, Chris?
It looks like a triangle. It's just
It
very,
makes a
very
little
small.
triangle. It's
Look at that.
triangulation, but this is triangulation by radar. The Aboard Navy ships, whenever we are at doing what we call navigation detail, making sure the ship doesn't run aground when we're within a certain proximity to land, we man up. We get all the best navigators on station, and so I'm an operations specialist, and then the other people on board ship that do navigation are the quartermasters. And so the quartermasters use a chart and use visual bearings, and they will do the lines of bearing like I've done here. And the operations specialist will use radar and radnav and will swing arcs. And so both of us are doing the
Okay.
exact same navigation in real time. We're doing it at exact same time, but we're doing it two different methods, and then we compare. And we do this every minute, one time every single minute. We update our position by visual and by radar navigation every minute to make sure we're tracking the ship as accurately as possible in real time so that we don't run aground. Um,
Now,
so,
does that model, that explanation right there, that entire process, that does not matter if you're in a sailboat, a dinghy, a 30-foot yacht,
or an
a
aircraft carrier.
or an aircraft carrier.
Yep.
Okay. Now,
Same process.
same for submarine, or are we talking something
So
completely different?
I will say in all my time in the Navy and all the stuff, like my standard little catchphrase that I tell everybody is that I'm the guy that joined the Navy because I wanted to do all the stuff they show in the commercial. I believe there's only two things they show in the commercial that I haven't done. I've never been catted off the catapult on an aircraft carrier in a jet.
Okay.
Uh, I've landed on an aircraft carrier, but I've never been catapulted off, and I've never stepped foot aboard a submarine. I've not stepped one single
Oh,
little
wow.
piggy aboard a submarine. I know their navigation system is inertial because they obviously they can't have a GPS antenna under the water. So their system is a hyper accurate inertial dead reckoning system. And I'm not really sure how it works. And I think even if I knew how it worked, I probably wouldn't be allowed to say it. But I really don't. I've never stepped
Right.
foot aboard a submarine. So I really can't give you a good answer to that. I think I have heard that the navigation system on a submarine is akin to the navigation system that an Apache helicopter uses. But
Okay.
I'm not an Apache helicopter pilot either, so I can't speak intelligently about that
Got it.
either. So
Okay.
um, yeah, so the ways you kind of reset each day if you were traveling over great distances of water is you could determine your position celestial, you could determine your position GPS, or you could do radar navigation or visual navigation. So really, like the things you need because you're again going back a minute, like you're not limited to how much you can carry on your back, like if you're hiking
Right.
or if you're a like an infantry soldier like that. So you can have a big compass. Now we have gyro compasses, which you and Paul talked about this a little bit.
Right.
Magnetic compass points towards magnetic north. A gyro compass points towards true north. And so then if you're like on my hovercraft, we actually have both. So then, you know, you guys also reference this, like declination comes into play because there is, depending on where you are on Earth, there is a magnetic deviation
Yep.
from true north, depending on where you are, because the Earth's magnetic pole is offset from what the actual like North Pole is.
Right.
So you have to know that, and you have to take that into effect. But a gyro compass is a big, huge, heavy piece of equipment. Like you would not be able. I don't think they make gyro compasses small enough for like a person to carry. So we
Got it.
only have those aboard vehicles. I think aircraft do have gyro compasses. I'm not sure about that, but definitely Boats do. Vessels on the water definitely have a gyro compass. And you need charts of whatever area you're going to. So I mean, like when in the Navy, when we get ready to go on deployment, we carry we have a digital chart catalog, and we actually have we have a chart room that is a huge library of actual paper charts that are like one chart is probably like maybe 6 foot by 3 foot,
Okay.
on this nice heavy paper. So we have an entire library of all the charts. You need the tools I just held up a minute ago, your parallel rulers and your dividers, and then you need gauges to accurately determine your course and speed. And then a radar is a good thing to have, and a GPS unit is a good thing to have, and and a pair of binoculars. But
Right. Okay.
all of this translates to underwater navigation. And here's another little cool visual aid. This is
Ah,
my swimmer's compass board, or they call it an
look at
attack
that thing.
board.
Okay.
I make these if anybody's interested.
Look
Um,
at that.
but this is what we use, like combat swimmers use in the Navy. So you have a
Okay.
big compass right there in the middle,
Yep.
and then I have a depth gauge. I would have one on my wrist, but then a secondary one on my board because we want redundancy, and then just a wristwatch.
Look at that.
You could put a dive computer on here or whatever, but basically for navigating underwater, the way we determine how far we've gone is by kick cycles, and it's very akin to what Paul described as counting your pace when you're doing land navigation. So when you're training up for underwater navigation as a diver, you determine your kick cycles, like how many kick cycles does it
Okay.
take you to go 100 feet.
Yep.
And like in the Navy, when we're doing combat swimmer operations, like we'll sneak insert into the water, like on one side of a harbor or one, or area of water, and the divers will have to swim underwater, like an underwater compass course, to get underneath a specific ship. And there might be 10 ships tied up at a pier, but you have to get the specific one that you place a mine on to blow it up. So your navigation has to be dead on so that you arrive at the exact ship. So you place the explosive on the correct ship, and then you swim away and arrive back at where your friendly dudes are, not where enemy dudes are.
Got it.
So underwater, like we do things like we try to like when we're changing course and things, we try to stick to 90-degree turns because that's easier to compute when you're um, cold or fatigued or in the dark or whatever. Underwater, 90-degree turns are easier to do. So we try to do everything as 90 degrees. Like I said, you have to maintain a constant depth, and then you're like, I have a G-Shock. This is one of the ones that was issued to me, G-Shock on here, that can count your time, and it can, like, typically the watch that you would wear on your wrist is counting your overall dive time for your dive safety, but for actual navigation, you need a separate watch that actually has like a stopwatch function, so you can count each leg of your navigation. Obviously, underwater, GPS doesn't work. Underwater, you can't have a chart. You can't like pull out a map and look at it. We have what's called a swimmer slate, where you just write down that this compass course you're going on this heading for this distance, and you can break it down to distance and time. Um, but one person has the attack board,
Okay.
and you have your arms at 90 degrees, and like, when you're doing like a combat swimmer up like that, you're not looking around at all the fishies and the coral. You are laser focused on your attack board because you're trying to maintain an exact heading. You don't want your heading to drift off any. It's going to, because there's underwater currents and things, and you have to have enough training and experience that you can feel that you're constantly getting pushed to the left, and then you kind of have to just make an educated guess on how much and then make a correction. But you're laser focused on your attack board, watching your exact compass heading, making sure your depth stays constant. Again, using that piece of string analogy, if you're constantly going up and down and up and down, you're shortening what you think your distance has been.
Okay.
And then your stopwatch is a secondary check on how far you've gone, because based on your kick cycle, each leg should be X number of kick cycles, but should also correspond to a X number of time. And when we're doing a combat swimmer op, one person you're always in a pair, always. One person will be on the attack board, and the other person will be what's doing what we call like usually turtle backing. Like they'll be just like one diver will be face down on their attack board, the other diver will kind of be laying on their back face up and kicking. That second diver is doing nothing other than counting kick cycles. And then, kind of like what I said about navigating a Navy ship, the quartermasters and the OSs are doing two separate things and then comparing.
Okay.
Divers are doing the same thing. One guy's doing the attack board, watching the depth, the compass heading, and he's counting his own kick cycles. But in case he forgets or goes, oh shit, I just counted to was that 100 or was that 200? Fuck, I forgot. Your other guy is doing nothing but counting kick cycles, and so this
Okay.
takes a lot of training and a lot of experience and to get good in underwater navigation. But it's still the same thing. It's still dead reckoning. You still have to have a method of determining approximately how far you've gone, approximately what speed you're going, and approximately what course or heading you're on, and you can use those things to go back to that distance speed time triangle and roughly figure out where you are.
All right. So like what you were just talking about in that piece of equipment that you put up there. Now that's not something that is Navy specific, right? Like any diver should have something like that
So,
or
like I said, just I'm not really trying to sell these because it's a labor of love, but the ones that of these that the Navy has, it's under a very specific contract that these are made just for the U.S. Navy and foreign allied militaries. And a regular person could buy one, but they cost about $4,000 to buy
well,
one.
right. My
But
question, I guess, is does a regular person need one of those if they're going to get into scuba diving? I
no,
mean,
you
right.
just
Okay.
need approximately two brain cells that are functioning and a compass, and
Okay.
you'll pretty much be good. But like I'm a nerd, and I get like not to I don't want to hurt my arm patting myself on the back, but like all the people I dive with tell me that like I'm the best person at underwater navigation that they know, and that like, oh, I want to get as good as you at navigation, and but it's because I have a depth of understanding of all these different types of navigation that I'm able to like, I think more effectively than the average person apply it to underwater. And so that's why I started making these little attack boards, because number one, I like the SEAL team wasn't going to let me walk away with a $5,000 piece of gear,
Yeah.
and I wanted one, and I didn't want to steal it from the Navy, so I figured out a way to build one that's actually honestly probably really really close to the equivalent to the one the Navy uses. But I make these for about, if you don't count the cost of the watch and the depth gauge, if it's just the compass and the board, I make these for about 500. Yeah, probably about $500 I have in them, and then and but
Well, honestly, obviously, if anybody is interested in this, or if we have anybody that's listening to the show that is into scuba diving and they're interested in that, please make sure that you put a comment down below so we can, so either myself or Jamie can get you some
But yeah,
information on
but
it.
this one that I make,
Uh,
and I think I've got one that's mine, and then I just for kind of shits and giggles, I built two more of them. They're down in my garage, just sitting there collecting dust in their little cases that I made for them. But yeah, I wanted one because we used them when I was at the SEAL team, and it's a really cool piece of gear, but it's a little bit overkill for what a normal recreational scuba diver would be doing. Um, I would say normal recreational scuba divers don't really do that much point to point navigation. Typically, you swim out until you're at a half a tank, and then you turn around and swim back.
okay.
There are like there's boat dives and stuff that I go on that I'll swim like a box pattern, again underwater, sticking to 90-degree turns is your best bet. Um, but yeah, like anybody that dives with me knows that we always come up right where we're supposed to. So
Okay. Um, so so obviously there's a pretty considerable difference when it comes to underwater navigation versus on top of the water navigation. That's a fair statement.
yes, but again, it
I get
boils
it. Yeah.
down to having a really solid four-dimensional understanding of the basics.
Right, right. But I mean, again, we're so, and whether we do a part two on this or not, I mean, comes down to, obviously, is there more juice to squeeze here? If it's not, then it's, that's fine. And we kind of end it here. If we get a lot of people that ask about, hey, can you go a little bit more in depth on this and kind of go and look at it from a novice's point of view, I think I went that way with when we did the episode with Paul. I said, okay, listen, Jamie, I know that you're a subject matter expert on nautical navigation, and I want to start with, scuba diving. And what's the best way that I can get good at learning how to do it? Is there a starting point or a jumping off point? And then the same could be said if a boater. Going back to what I said at the beginning is, you know, anybody can go get their boater's license. They take the boater safety course, they go get their boat license, and they go buy a boat and they put it in their water and they make sure that there's gas in it. They turn the key and they fire it up, and they want to go from Connecticut to Block Island. Well, there's no road maps. There's no stop sign. There's no you take
Correct.
a right on this highway, and then you take a left on this highway, and you travel 5 miles, and you get off exit 29. There is none of that. Um, so understanding some of this, and then I think because what I'm definitely realizing here is, and we've talked about this in the past, skill versus gear. This is one of those things where you really do need a combination of both. Like, I don't know. I mean, could you navigate right now in a distance like that from, let's say, Connecticut to Block Island? And not that you know where those are, but could you do that without some form of navigation?
No, to actually come in, like, on time at a specific location, you definitely would need navigational equipment. You would definitely need a chart. You would definitely need a compass. You definitely need something to be able to gauge your speed. Like, when we do talk about like ancient mariners, thousands of years ago, not just going back a couple of hundred years ago to the 1800s and early 1900s, but when we're talking about actual ancient mariners that were traveling 1,000 miles over open water. I mean, when you're talking about leaving England and trying to hit Florida, I mean, that's a pretty big target.
Right.
And so, the tools back then could get them close enough to leave England and hit Florida most of the time. But once you get within sight of land, you would just kind of have to scurry down the coastline until you found the area you were looking for. So I could probably do that today, given your example with the absolute most basic tools. Like, if I just had a compass and an outboard motor and a chart, I probably could get us close enough that I could hit, Block Island. But could I hit the harbor entrance on the first shot? Probably not. I probably can get us close enough that we can see the island over there, and now I can turn and just drive
Right.
towards the
Yeah. Yeah.
landmass that I see, and then skirt up the coastline until I see what looks like a harbor, and then pull us in. But no, but to do actual like exact navigation, you definitely do need the proper equipment, and this is one of those things that actually, unlike a lot of the other survival things that we talk about, the more you have, the better off you're going to be, the more accurate you're going to be able to be. And this is just this was a very broad overview. I know a couple of times it sounded like I was going into detail, but it's just I was trying to illustrate my points in a way that people listening could understand. Um, a couple of years ago, like I earned my 100-ton master's license from the Coast Guard, and I mean that's a pretty advanced certification, boating certification, if you will.
Okay.
Um, that's a 3-week course, and that course is designed for people that already know what they're doing. That's not
Got it.
designed for people that are just walking through the door. So even people that already know what they're doing, we did a 3-week advanced level course on nothing but this. I mean, you literally, so yeah, you ask if we could do a part 2. Yeah, I mean, I could probably teach a college class on this, but it's as in depth as you want to go. But then the other side of that spectrum, like somebody that's just getting into scuba diving, when you get your like PADI open water certification or advanced open water certification, it's about a 1 hour long training block, like online e-learning, electronic learning, little online course that you do. It takes about an hour, that explains the fundamentals of how to use a compass and how to determine how far you've gone. And then when you actually go do your certification dives, you just do a very basic. You do one that's out and back, and then
Mhm.
you do one it's not quite. It's like you do one square. You do one out and back and one square pattern. which basically just shows the instructor that you understand how to correctly use a compass. But so I mean that's the other end of the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you've probably got like college level courses on
Got it.
navigation, and on the
Yeah,
other end of the spectrum, when you're getting your PADI open water certification, it's just kind of a 1 hour understanding of the basics, and then
got it.
you know.
Okay. Well, folks, Jamie gave a lot of information here,
I
and
tried to sprinkle in a little bit of history and heritage to keep it
no,
interesting too. So
for sure. I mean, and obviously there is some history there, and there's some heritage there. So if you guys are interested in a part two, then obviously put that down in the comments, and we would love to hear some feedback on that, or in the comment section on the YouTube channel when the video drops. Um, you know, any
and
boat.
one other quick point that I
Sure.
just thought of. Your example, could I navigate from Connecticut to Block Island?
Yeah.
The other end of this, that because on one end, I was talking about throwing a log overboard and counting knots on a string. In 2024, my Garmin watch that I have upstairs could absolutely, like, it's this big and you wear it on your wrist, and I could absolutely navigate us exactly on heading and arrive on point with something as simple as a decent quality GPS watch. So, yeah, so there definitely is a full spectrum to that. But
Got it.
fortunately, we do live in an era where that's
Right.
possible, where we're not using logs and hourglasses anymore. So.
Yes, very true, very true. All right, folks. So, like I said, there's a lot of information that was given today, and thank you for listening and hopefully watching this video. And if you are interested in more, we would love to hear back from you guys on this episode. I think navigation, whether you're on land, whether you're on the sea or the open water, is important to know, because getting lost doesn't only mean on land. If you do a lot of boating, or if you're a boater, or you have people that that have boats, and something tragic happens while you're out there, you've got to know how to get back.
So it's actually one of our mutual friends, Chris. We both know this person.
Okay.
They a couple of years ago they went on they thought they were just signing up for like a pretty simple little kayaking excursion, in a coastal area. And this person and his I think girlfriend at the time,
Okay.
they went out on kayaks, and they thought they were going one way, but the current and the winds took them another way. And then and they were just enjoying themselves. They weren't worried about navigation. And by the time they finally stopped and kind of took stock and looked around and tried to ascertain where they were, they realized they had no idea where they were. And I think it's something that we've talked about in other episodes. And I think it's something that you and Paul talked about. Is one of the biggest mistakes people make when they realize they're lost is they convince themselves that, like, the trail, it's just over here. I just need to walk a little bit further and
Oh
I'll find
yeah,
the
yeah,
trail, or my car is just around the next bend. It's over the next hill.
yeah.
And what they'll actually do is get loster and loster and loster. And on the water, that can turn really deadly really fast.
Oh yeah, for
The
sure.
absolute harshest environment on Earth to survive is water survival in the ocean.
Yeah, yeah. I
You're
mean, obviously, the ocean is vast, it's deep, and you are on the buffet,
Yep.
and you don't
And
know that
so
when you don't know when your dish is getting picked.
our friend, like Gilligan, thought he was going out for a 3 hour tour, and realized he was lost. And I was actually really proud of him, because he didn't use his ego to go, let's just go back this way. Let's just go this way. Let's just go try to, like, he they realized they didn't know where they were.
Yeah,
He had the wherewithal to realize that this situation could turn really bad really quickly. He pulls out his cell phone and realized, thankfully, he was still within cell phone distance, and he called the Coast Guard. And
yeah,
that's an extremely smart thing to do, and I think it speaks very highly of that person, that they didn't try to ego it out. They didn't try to be like, I know the way back.
right.
He was like, I don't know where the heck we are, and I'm not familiar with
Yeah, yeah,
navigation on a kayak, so I'm
yeah.
going to call the experts. And so that
Smart
was,
move. But
yeah, smart move.
so all right, folks. Well, listen, thank you for spending some time with us again today. And like I said, we really appreciate it. We hope that you enjoyed some of the information coming out of today's show. And if you want to hear more, please let us know. So until next time, you guys stay safe out there. Jamie?
Hey, that's it. Just like the story I just told. It's easy to be hard and it's hard to be smart. And my friend in the kayak did the smart thing. So be like him.
Awesome. All right, guys. We'll talk to you soon. ZP002 out.